Hello, RC from the Mountaintop Joiner Shop here. In the late 90s, Bill Cosby hosted a resurrection of the American television comedy series Kids Say the Darndest Things. And I thought about it often when preparing for this video. You see, much like the kids on that show, people on the internet are very much in the habit of repeating things that they've heard elsewhere without giving any thought at all as to whether it's actually true. Also, not unlike toddlers, internet commenters tend not to have much of a social filter either, so they may say things that are unintentionally insulting or clearly not adhering to logical principles. For whatever reason, when I see people confidently make wrong statements in the internet comment sections, statements they clearly picked up from other unthinking parrots online, it triggers me. It triggers me bad. And woodworkers are not immune to this kind of groupthink, a term that is, in itself, clearly an oxymoron. It makes me think I'm really not cut out for being on social media at all. But not only am I on social media, I have a YouTube channel, for some reason. Turns out in the long run, Bill Cosby is now much more famous for other reasons than he is for hosting that show, but I digress. So where was I? Right. Woodworkers repeat wrong things they've seen online. It shouldn't bother me, but it does. And I have a YouTube channel about woodworking, despite my better judgment. So I thought, why not further ignore my better judgment and undertake the woodworking equivalent of Jon Snow facing down the bloodthirsty hordes, and do a video in which I push back on some of the misguided woodworking tropes that, not unlike half-frozen zombies, refuse to die. So let's hop to it, shall we? In no particular order. So I think I'll start with the one that triggers me the most first, because this is an actual comment someone has made on one of my videos. And I'm in the process of deep cleaning and reevaluating some of the layout of my shop this very week. I think the reason that it grinds my gears so bad is that not only does the latter part of that statement not logically follow from the former, and is therefore patently stupid, for me, at least, the opposite is true. You see, I'm a studio furniture maker, which means I'm designing the pieces that I make as I build them. It's become readily apparent to me in my upteen years of designing and building furniture pieces for money that if my shop is full of clutter, so is my thinking. And if I can't think because I'm distracted by this pile of crap over here and I keep tripping over that pile of crap over there, I can't design. And if I can't design, I can't build. Furthermore, I can't build if my shop is so messy and disorganized that I can't find the tool that I need when I need it. I can't do joinery layout if I can't find my square or my pencil or my marking knife. Can't do finish prep if my sanding block isn't where it's supposed to be. Picking up what I'm laying down here? I've encountered this same misapplication of logic in the form of another comment that said I must not be getting much done because my shop apron is so clean. It's not clean. It's clearly stained with sawdust and glazed with bits of high glue. But the fact is, there are lots of reasons I don't get a lot done in my shop. I promise, anything you can do, I can do slower. But the cleanliness of my shop and my apron are not among them. If you feel you work better surrounded by random piles of debris while wearing an apron that looks like it was pulled from the rubble of a meat packing plant after an earthquake, more power to you. But just because that's true for you doesn't make it true for everyone. Unless you're using your hand tool blades for your work as a barber, and if you are, I'm definitely not coming to you next time I need a shave, then your woodworking blades don't need to be able to cut hair. I know this sounds crazy, but they really only need to be able to cut wood. I tend to spend as little time sharpening as possible so I can get back to woodworking. The first time I pick up a hand tool for use in a project, I go and sharpen it. I raise a burr on the back side of the blade, I remove that burr, I put the slightest micro bevel on it, I flatten the back a little more, and I get back to work. I don't stop to shave the hair off my arms. I don't see if it catches on my thumbnail. I don't go out back and try to down aircraft with the glint off my mirror-polished blade. I don't post videos on Instagram of me slicing a sheet of paper with it. I don't often even feel the blade with my thumb. I just get back to work. Because I'm pretty confident the blade I just sharpened will cut wood just fine. When the blade seems to require more effort to engage with the wood than it did after I sharpened it, I might stop to inspect the blade visually. Ideally, the bevel and the back of a given blade should come to a point so fine that you can't really see it. If you can see that intersection, especially with eyes as bad as mine, that blade stands to benefit mightily from some sharpening. If I were to make an exception to this routine, it would be when sharpening the blade on my smoothing plane before applying it to some unruly or highly figured wood. Then and only then will I go through the effort to make my blade capable of splitting an atom. Otherwise, it just needs to be able to cut wood. This assumption is a mainstay in woodworking forums and online groups whenever someone is fretfully choosing a finish for a cutting board, salad bowl, hand-carved spoon, anything that'll come in contact with food or children, basically. And they say things like, "I don't want any chemicals in my food," which, being married to a chemist, is really enjoyable to hear people say. Everything that physically exists is a chemical, dude. Everything. Including food. Everything. So forgive me for being presumptuous, but what I think these people really mean is toxic chemicals, the kinds of chemicals that can hurt them. Now, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to be concerned about. But here's the thing that people forget, or may have never learned in the first place, and that is the dose makes the poison. Water, the most crystal clear, double reverse osmosis purified water, can kill you if you drink enough of it fast enough. Conversely, if you accidentally ingest an apple seed, which has cyanide in it, you're going to be perfectly fine. You need to ingest somewhere in the neighborhood of like 250,000 apple seeds for it to be able to kill you. The dose makes the poison. Similarly, there's a prevailing assumption that natural things are good for you and synthetic things are bad for you. And that's not necessarily the case. The cyanide in those apple seeds isn't synthetically derived. It's very much a naturally occurring thing, but it's still not good for you in high doses. Cobra venom is natural too. It's organic and everything. You know what else is natural? Lightning. Conversely, many vitamins and skincare products are synthetically derived because doing so results in a product that is of high purity, it's shelf stable, and not derived from scarce resources that may be harmful to animals or the environment. Many life-saving medicines, life-saving, by some estimates as much as half of them are synthetically derived. So to bring this back around to wood finishes, most of the toxic stuff that's in clear wood finishes is in the form of solvents and metallic drying agents. Now, there was a time when paint pigments and metallic drying agents contained lead, which is considered toxic at pretty much any dose, let alone the dosages present in the average paint chip. But by the 1970s, lead was banned by law from all finishes. Nowadays, the nasty stuff in solvents and metallic drying agents either evaporates or outgasses as the finish is curing, or are rendered inert during the curing process. Therefore, and I can't stress this enough, virtually all finishes are food safe once fully cured. And you don't just need to take my word for it. Bob Flexner, who worked as a woodworker and furniture restorer for 20 years while writing books like this one, as well as hundreds of articles for woodworking magazines and editing a leading furniture restoration publication, has been railing against this myth for most of his career. Anyway, in this book, long considered the definitive book on wood finishing, he makes several points illustrating how metallic dryers aren't a problem for food or mouth contact once the finish is fully cured. And I quote, "No material safety data sheet, otherwise known as the MSDS, required by the government to list all hazardous or toxic effects of a product, warns against contact with food or children's mouths for any oil or varnish finish or for any other finish. The Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, lists all common dryers as safe for food contact as long as the finish is made properly, that is, as long as the finish cures. The FDA doesn't approve of finishes, as some manufacturers claim. The FDA approves of ingredients and sets rules for testing that a finish cures properly." And lastly, you have never heard of anyone, adult or child, being poisoned by contact with a cured clear finish. If someone has been poisoned, you can bet it would have made the news. Now, if you didn't eat lead paint chips as a kid, your next question might be, well, how do I know if the finish is done curing and safe to put charcuterie on for my kid's super posh bougie birthday party? All of his dorky kid friends are coming over, and I don't want to poison them. As far as I know, there are two, albeit imperfect, ways to determine that. One way is to read the can that the finish came in. Usually it says on there somewhere what kind of dry time you can expect and under what conditions, and what the time until full cure is as well. If it doesn't, sometimes you can ask the internet and get a straight answer. For instance, I asked the internet, how much time for Zinsser seal coat to cure? And it answered with dry times. Dry to the touch times and curing times are two totally different things. So I adjusted my query to how much time for Zinsser seal coat to fully cure. I added the proper capitalization and the word fully, and it came back with an answer of about 24 hours. Another, quicker, albeit not 100% accurate way to determine if the finish is done curing is to give it a good sniff. Stick your nose right up in there, like a dog meeting someone new, and see if it smells like finish. If you can smell any finish at all, it's probably not done curing yet. Just remember, the dose makes the poison. So if you sit there huffing an uncured salad bowl that you just made all day, every day, you're probably going to give yourself a headache, or worse. So don't do that. Okay, that was mostly true, but it isn't always true. Anybody who's done a lot of furniture making with both hand and power tools can point to an instance in which the hand tool is the much simpler, much faster way to do a certain something or other. They'll be like, I was just about to spend half the day making this complicated custom jig that mounts to my table saw sled so I can cut it with my dado blade, and then I realized I could just cut most of the waste with a coping saw, refine the rest with a rasp, and clean it up with some sandpaper. Done. So yes, hand tools are usually pretty slow. That's one of the biggest reasons machines were invented in the first place. Hand tools are slow right up until they aren't. Once again, the absolutist take is the intellectually lazy take, which brings us to this next one. Okay, well, this one is also mostly true, but it also isn't always true. Once again, anybody who's done a lot of furniture making with both hand and power tools can point to an exception. A few years ago now, I did a video entitled The Most Important Hand Plane in My Shop, in which I demonstrated that my shooting board plane is uniquely capable of trimming the end grain of boards with an accuracy measured in thousandths of an inch, while keeping said end grain nice and clean and perfectly square. You'd be hard-pressed to do all that with even a top-of-the-line table saw or router. The relative accuracy of hand tools really depends on what you're trying to do, with what tool, and with what set of skills. My big rip panel saw leaves a cut that isn't much cleaner or more accurate than you get with a Sawzall. Conversely, I've seen people do things with carving chisels I don't know how you'd even get a CNC machine to do. Yeah, this one, it kind of depends. Are you noticing a theme developing here? Are we talking an oil finish or some kind of film finish? Are we talking about the smoothness of the finish to the touch, or how the wood looks with finish on it? If we're talking about the smoothness of the surface and you're using a film finish, sanding beyond 220 grit is going to yield rapidly diminishing returns, because once the wood itself feels smooth to the touch and you apply a film finish and you let it cure and you remove any dust nibs, you're no longer feeling the actual wood with your hand, but the finish itself. Whether you sanded the wood underneath that to 220 grit or 600 grit makes no difference at all as to how smooth the finish feels to the touch. Now, if you're using an oil finish that leaves no film or any layer of material on the surface of any kind, you might want to go try a test piece, sanded to 320 or so, and see if it makes any difference in the outcome. I'm skeptical, but I also don't use basic oil finishes. So let me know in the comments if you have any experience with this and any data points to report. I'd be curious to know. So that covers the smoothness of a finish to the touch, but what about end grain and figured woods that you want to look as good as possible after the finish goes on? You've probably noticed that when you sand an entire board to 1 grit and you apply your finish, the end grain comes out significantly darker than the face grain and feels rougher to the touch. This is because the surface structure and the porosity of the end grain is completely different from that of the face grain or the long grain. And as such, if you want the end grain to be similar in tone to the face grain for aesthetic reasons or whatever, and you want it equally smooth to the touch, you'll need to sand it to a higher grit than the face grain. So your face grain may be 220 grit, and your end grain may be up to 320 or 400. Now what about the face of a figured piece of wood? Generally speaking, a lot of figured wood is figured because the grain is wavy and running in and out of the face of the board. If you're trying to show off this figure, this is a case where you don't want to sand the end grain on the face of the board to a higher grit than the long grain, or your figure will be less pronounced. I don't know how you do this anyways. This seems like it'd be awful tedious. That said, because the end grain that meets the surface has a different surface texture, you might want to experiment with sanding to a slightly higher grit than 220 to achieve the surface smoothness you're after, especially after using an oil finish. But as long as the entire face is treated with the same grit, that figure will be nice and visible. That said, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about doing your finish prep with hand planes, because so what happens if you're able to get your smoothing plane to slice wispy thin shavings from the surface of a figured board? And how does that compare to the same board just sanded? It turns out that someone has already run this experiment. A good 8 years ago, Mark Spagnuolo, aka the Wood Whisperer, perhaps you've heard of him, did a video that I'll link to in the description that shows a sharp, finely tuned hand plane can really make the figure in a board pop when finish is applied to it. So if that's what you're going for, that maximum pop, that's what you do. And if for some reason you want to tone down that pop because it feels overpowering to the overall look of the furniture piece, then sanding can help achieve that. I've harped on this one in another video, but it bears repeating. When most potential clients and even some interior designers say they want furniture that's modern with clean lines, what they're picturing in their heads is mid-century modern or Danish modern design. But I'd argue that at this point in human history, in the year 2026, nothing that was a thing in the 1950s has any right to be called modern. Is the 57 Chevrolet Bel Air a modern design? Is the rotary phone a modern design? How about white gloves on women's hands? Anything with an ashtray built into it modern? No, they are not. As a term, mid-century modern has become an oxymoron. Mid-century modern case furniture, in particular, is only modern insofar as it's made from modern materials like particle board with plasticky fake veneers. It's only modern insofar as it's made by robots and has no soul. If a featureless box made of termite diarrhea on tiny metal stilts, like a hippopotamus with the legs of a flamingo, is what you're into, that's fine. I mean, some people like country music. But can we stop pretending that it's modern? Please? When I see fellow YouTubers and woodworking instructors imply or just outright say that the way they do a certain operation is the only way to do it, or else you're doing it wrong, I instinctively cringe pretty hard. If you've watched enough of my long-form build videos, you know that I often preface something I'm about to show you with the phrase, like anything in woodworking, there are many different ways to do this, but this is because A, it's true, and B, it'd be a disservice to you if I didn't at least make you aware that my way of doing something isn't the only way of doing something. Take sharpening, for instance. You can sharpen any number of ways. You can use a machine like a Tormek. You can use diamond plates or water stones or sandpaper. You can use a honing guide, or you can freehand it. You can strop or you can not strop. I use steel lapping plates with diamond paste applied to them. But you may not like that idea for some reason. Maybe your uncle runs a sandpaper company, in which case sharpening with sandpaper probably makes more sense. I also try not to claim my way is the only way because I recognize that we're all in this craft for different reasons. The methods we choose depend in large part on what our goals are and what tools we have available to us. If all you're trying to do is build a birdhouse with your kid, and all you have to work with is a contractor saw and a cordless drill, well, then the correct way to do it is probably just to use a contractor saw and a cordless drill. Don't let some self-important snob like me with a camera and a YouTube channel tell you otherwise. If you want to CNC and 3D print your way to glory, cool. If you want to don buckled shoes and mix up your own fish glue and build a grandfather clock using little more than an old hand saw in chisels fashioned from sustainably harvested beaver's teeth, go for it. If you just need to go in your shop and shut the door for a while, and whether or not you get anything done isn't even important, with everything going on in the world right now, I can totally respect that. In fact, if you'll excuse me, I think that sounds good. I think I'm going to do that right now. That sounds good. Oh yeah. Judge me because of the way my apron looks. Dumb son of a... Did this video remind you of any other woodworking myths that need to die? Leave them in the comments so we can argue about it. That said, any comment that resorts to directly insulting myself or other commenters personally will be deleted. I have no intention of contributing to the cesspool of incivility that is the internet comment section. Thank you for understanding, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Now, if you like what you saw here, please hit like and subscribe. It would help me out a lot. Also hit the little bell icon if you want to be notified anytime I release a new video. And if you didn't like what you saw here, keep it to yourself, pal. Or watch one of my other videos. You might like one of those. Thank you for watching.